I have stood in many courtrooms. I have heard every excuse, every justification, every clever legal maneuver designed to protect people who believe the rules were written for someone else. I have watched defendants cry crocodile tears. I have watched attorneys spin stories so elaborate they should have come with a table of contents. I have seen genuine remorse, and I have seen performances designed to look like it. After years on this bench, very little surprises me anymore. But I want to tell you about the morning Alexandra Whitmore walked through those courtroom doors, because it is a story I will never forget. And once you hear it, neither will you. It is a story about what happens when privilege collides with accountability head on. It is a story about what wealth can do to a person when nobody ever tells them no. And it is a story about a woman named Maria Chin, who sat quietly in the third row and reminded this entire courtroom what dignity actually looks like. And before we go further, if you believe in real accountability, go ahead and subscribe. This channel is built for people who believe justice should be blind to bank accounts. She was 24 years old, dressed in a cream silk dress that looked custom fitted and wildly inappropriate for court, designer bag, oversized sunglasses, heels that struck the floor with a sharp, deliberate rhythm that said, "Everybody look at me." There was a coldness in her posture that I recognized immediately. Not confidence, not strength, entitlement. The kind that gets layered on a person when nobody in their life has ever looked them in the eye and said no. She was 20 minutes late. Her attorney rushed in ahead of her, nearly tripping over his expensive shoes, already apologizing before he reached the defense table. Alexandra strolled in behind him like she was arriving at a private luncheon. No urgency, no remorse, no acknowledgement that a courtroom full of people had been waiting on her. I let her walk all the way to the table. Then I spoke. "Miss Whitmore," I said, "I'm glad you finally decided to join us. I trust there's a serious explanation for why you kept this court waiting." She removed her sunglasses with theatrical slowness, folded them carefully, and looked at me the way someone looks at a minor inconvenience. "Traffic was bad," she said. "You know how it is." "No, Your Honor." No apology, just a casual shrug wrapped in designer fabric. Her attorney jumped in immediately. "Your Honor, we sincerely apologize." I gave him a brief nod, but kept my eyes on Alexandra. "Miss Whitmore, I need you to understand something right now," I said. "This is not brunch. This is not a networking event. This is a courtroom. When you are ordered to appear before me at 9 a.m., I expect you to be here at 9 a.m. Are we clear?" She gave a small shrug. "Sure," a shrug. The case file in front of me laid out the facts plainly. Alexandra Whitmore had rear-ended a minivan at a red light, a minivan carrying 2 children. When the driver stepped out to check on her kids and exchange information, Alexandra had looked at the damaged vehicle, made a dismissive comment, and driven away. Through a red light, without a second glance. Traffic cameras had caught every second of it. The driver of that minivan was Maria Chin, a hospice nurse, a single mother of 2, a woman who spent her nights caring for dying patients and still managed to get her children to school every morning with a smile. She sat in the third row of my courtroom wearing scrubs, exhausted from a night shift, watching the woman who had destroyed her car behave like this entire proceeding was an inconvenience on her social calendar. I had read Maria's statement before the hearing began. I knew what she had been through. I knew about the sleepless nights, the scrambled finances, the children who now flinched every time a car stopped too close behind them at a traffic light. Maria Chin had not come to my courtroom looking for revenge. She had come looking for something far more valuable. The truth, acknowledged out loud, in public, by a system that too often looked the other way when the guilty party had enough money to make inconvenience disappear. Alexandra's father was Richard Whitmore, billionaire CEO of Whitmore Technologies. Estimated net worth, $2.3 billion. His family name was carved into hospital wings, university buildings, and charity event banners across the city. The Whitmores were the kind of family whose donations came with press releases. They gave generously, publicly, and strategically. And in exchange, doors opened, charges quietly reduced themselves, and problems had a way of resolving before they became embarrassing. Alexandra had grown up watching that happen her entire life. She had learned the lesson her parents never intended to teach, that money was not just comfort, it was armor, that the world had two sets of rules, and her family lived under the more forgiving set. She was about to learn that my courtroom operates under a different system entirely. If you've ever felt like justice only works for certain people, subscribe and stay with me, because this story has something to say to all of us. While I reviewed the file, I noticed something under the defense table. Alexandra was checking her phone. "Miss Whitmore," my voice was sharp, "put that away." She looked up, caught off guard that I had noticed. There is nothing on that phone more important than what is happening in this room right now. Put it away." A long, dramatic sigh. She dropped the phone into her purse like I had asked her to surrender a kidney. Her attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if we could move forward, my client does have another commitment this afternoon." Another commitment. I leaned forward slowly. "Counselor, your client is facing reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction charges. These are not parking tickets. Unless her other commitment involves an emergency room, she will be right here in this courtroom until I am finished with her, however long that takes." Alexandra leaned over and whispered something to her attorney. He shook his head quickly. She ignored him. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is kind of ridiculous. It was a fender bender. My insurance handles these things." I looked at her for a long, quiet moment. A fender bender. Maria Chen's minivan had been totaled. Her children had been terrified. She had missed work. She had lost wages. She had spent days trying to put her life back together after Alexandra spent approximately 4 seconds deciding it wasn't her problem. "Miss Whitmore," I said, my voice measured, "let's make sure I understand your position. You struck another vehicle, caused significant damage, failed to remain at the scene as the law requires, and drove away. And your characterization of that is ridiculous?" "Accidents happen," she said. "Everyone's acting like I committed some huge crime." Her attorney looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I had the traffic camera footage pulled up on the monitor. We watched it together. Alexandra's BMW behind Maria's minivan at a red light. The sudden forward jolt. The impact. Maria stepping out, shaken, immediately turning to her back seat. Alexandra stepping out, looking at the damage, looking at Maria, and speaking. The audio was imperfect, but unmistakable. "Whatever, it's a piece of junk anyway." Then Alexandra walked back to her car, drove around the minivan, and went through the red light. When the footage ended, the courtroom was completely silent. I turned back to Alexandra. "Do you remember what you said to Miss Chen that morning?" "Not really. I was stressed." "The video shows you calling her vehicle a piece of junk." Her mouth curved. "I mean, it kind of was." A gasp moved through the gallery. Her attorney put his head in his hands. And that was the moment I stood up from the bench. People who have appeared before me know that when I rise in the middle of a proceeding, something significant is about to happen. Miss Whitmore, I want you to understand what you just did. You watched a recording of yourself causing an accident, abandoning the scene, and your first instinct was not remorse. It was to criticize the victim's vehicle. Is that correct? For the first time, a small crack appeared in her composure. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it? I just meant, my car is worth more, so the damage to her car would cost less. I let that sit in the air. Your car is worth more, I repeated slowly. So the harm you caused matters less? Basically, yeah. Her attorney shot to his feet. Your Honor, may I have a moment? Sit down, counselor. Your client is speaking very clearly for herself. I turned back to Alexandra. Walk me through your thinking that day. Explain your process. Another sigh. I was late for a meeting. The light changed. I hit the gas instead of the brake. It was an accident. That's why people call them accidents. And once you realized children were inside that vehicle, I checked. They looked fine. Kids cry over everything. From the third row, Maria Chin made a quiet sound. She was holding a tissue. Her expression was a controlled but devastating mix of disbelief and heartbreak. Miss Whitmore, those children had nightmares for weeks after this incident. Miss Chin's youngest became afraid to ride in a car. Alexandra answered without hesitation, "That's not my fault. That's their mother being dramatic." The courtroom erupted. I waited until the room quieted, then my voice cut through every remaining whisper. "So your position is that a mother is to blame for her children's fear that began when you crashed into them and drove away." "I'm just saying children take their cues from parents. If she'd stayed calm, they would have been fine." In my years on the bench, I have seen genuine remorse. I have seen people who made devastating choices and wept real tears over them. I have seen defendants who were reckless, broken, addicted, desperate, and still understood somewhere deep down that they had caused pain to another human being. Even people who tried to minimize their actions usually had a line, some small, stubborn place inside them where conscience still lived. Alexandra Whitmore was something different. And what made her different was not cruelty exactly. It was the complete and total absence of imagination for any life beyond her own. She could not picture what it felt like to be Maria Chin standing at that red light with a cut on her forehead, watching a BMW drive away. She could not picture Emma screaming from the back seat. She could not picture Michael asking his mother if they were going to die. She had never once been required to truly see past herself. She was the product of a life where every consequence had been absorbed by someone else, where wealth had functioned as a permanent buffer between her choices and their real-world impact. She had never been made to face what she had done, and it showed in every single word that came out of her mouth. Hit subscribe if you believe accountability should apply to everyone, because what's coming next in this case is exactly why courts like this matter. "Let's discuss what you did after leaving the scene," I said. "According to the police report, you went directly to your country club, had lunch, played 9 holes of golf. You did not contact your insurance company for 3 days, not until Ms. Chin identified you through your license plate and the police came to your door. Is that accurate?" I needed time to process. I leaned forward. Ms. Chin needed time to figure out how to get to work without a vehicle, how to explain to her children why they couldn't go to school, how to cover rent with wages she couldn't earn because the car that got her there no longer existed. While you were out on the golf course processing, she was at home trying to hold her family together with nothing. Alexandra's jaw tightened. That's what insurance is for. Insurance you didn't contact for 3 days. I was busy. Doing what? I had things, events. My life doesn't just stop because someone's car got. She stopped herself, but we all heard where that sentence was going. Every person in that courtroom heard it. The gallery had gone so quiet you could hear the ventilation system running overhead. I pulled a record. 3 speeding tickets in 2 years, a red light violation, a prior reckless driving charge that had been quietly reduced after her family's attorney negotiated it. This was not a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. Miss Whitmore, this is not your first time in a situation like this. Everyone speeds sometimes. Not everyone leaves the scene of an accident with children involved. I didn't run, I left. The word game was almost impressive in its audacity. You left after striking another vehicle and failing to provide the required information. Under the law, that is called hit and run. It is a crime, not a vocabulary choice. Her expression hardened. My father's attorney said this would be dismissed. There it was, the truth beneath all the performance. Someone had promised her she would walk away clean. Someone had told her the system could be managed. Someone had convinced her that laws bent for the right last name. Your father's attorney is not presiding over this courtroom, I said. I am. But he said with my record and our family's standing in the community, I raised my hand. Stop right there. I do not care about your family's standing. I do not care who your father is, what buildings carry your last name, what charitable foundations carry your family's signature. None of that belongs in this courtroom. None of that changes what you did. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsteady. What do you mean it doesn't matter? I mean that in this courtroom, you are not a billionaire's daughter. You are a defendant who broke the law." She looked to her attorney. He looked away. He already knew what was coming. "Before I deliver my ruling," I said, "you are going to hear from Ms. Chen." I opened the victim impact statement and read it into the record. "My name is Maria Chen. I am a single mother of 2 children, ages 7 and 9. On the morning of March 15th, my life was interrupted because another person decided her schedule mattered more than our safety. I was stopped at a red light when Alexandra Whitmore's vehicle slammed into mine. The impact threw me forward. My head struck the steering wheel. My daughter Emma began screaming in the back seat. My son Michael cried and asked if we were going to die. I stepped out of the car shaking, blood coming from a cut on my forehead. I walked toward Ms. Whitmore to exchange information. She looked at me. She saw my children. Then she drove away. For 3 days, I did not know who had hit us. My car was totaled. I could not afford a rental. I missed work. I lost wages I needed for rent and groceries. My children missed school. But the worst part was not the money. The worst part was the fear. Emma wakes up crying from nightmares. Michael asks me every morning if another car is going to hit us. They lost their sense of safety because someone chose to drive away rather than face what she had done. I work as a hospice nurse. I spend my days caring for people in the hardest moments of their lives. I try to offer compassion when people are most vulnerable. The person who hit me showed no compassion to me or my children. She saw us and she left. What kind of person does that? I set the statement down. Alexandra's hands were trembling. That is who you were that day, Miss Whitmore. A person who saw frightened children and chose convenience over decency. I didn't know they were scared, she whispered. You didn't stay long enough to care. I straightened the papers in front of me. Alexandra Whitmore, I find you guilty of leaving the scene of an accident involving property damage and personal injury. The courtroom leaned in. You will serve 60 days in county jail, not home confinement, not a work release arrangement, jail. You cannot be serious. I am extremely serious. Your driver's license is suspended for 1 full year. At the end of that year, you will retake both the written and driving examinations before reinstatement. Her face drained of color. You will complete 200 hours of community service at County General Hospital, where Ms. Chen works. You will learn what it looks like to show up for people instead of driving away from them. But I have commitments, charity events. Your commitments have changed. Her attorney rose. Your Honor, this is excessive. My client has no prior criminal record. Your client has a documented pattern of dangerous driving and a demonstrated absence of accountability. This sentence is designed to interrupt that pattern before someone is seriously hurt. I turned back to Alexandra directly. You told this court you are busy, that you have important things to attend to. Let me tell you what is actually important. She was crying now. Not the tears of remorse, the tears of someone discovering that consequences are real. What is important is a 7-year-old girl who cannot sleep because cars have become something she fears. What is important is a 9-year-old boy who asks his mother every single morning if they are going to be hit again. What is important is a woman who spends her life caring for others and was left bleeding at a red light by someone who couldn't spare 5 minutes to do the right thing. Her shoulders shook. You drove away because your entire life has told you that you could. Money and status have built a wall between you and reality. Today, that wall comes down. I picked up my gavel. When you are sitting in that jail cell, I want you to think about Emma. Think about Michael. Think about their nightmares. Think about the fear you put into children who had done absolutely nothing wrong. And think about who you want to be when you walk out. Alexandra covered her face with both hands. If you are willing to do the real work, you will leave that cell understanding something your wealth never taught you. That other people matter, that consequences are real, that a last name is not a shield. The gavel came down. Take her into custody. As the bailiffs moved toward her, Alexandra's composure collapsed completely. She turned toward the gallery, reaching out. "Daddy, please, do something." Richard Whitmore rose slowly from his seat. The room held its breath. For a moment, everyone wondered if he was about to exercise his power one last time. But what he said was not what anyone expected. "Alexandra," he said quietly, his voice heavy with something that sounded like the beginning of understanding. "You did this to yourself." Then he sat back down. The heels struck the courthouse floor one last time as she was led away. That same sharp, deliberate sound, now growing smaller and smaller with each step. I turned to Maria Chen. She had sat through all of it with her hands folded in her lap, composed and steady in a way that took real strength. "Miss Chen, is there anything you'd like to say?" His voice cracked. "My wife and I gave Alexandra everything. We thought we were helping her. But somewhere along the way, we built someone who thought rules existed for other people. That is our failure too." He removed a checkbook from his jacket. "I'd like to create a fund for Miss Chen's children, for their therapy, their education, whatever they need. Not to reduce the sentence, not to purchase forgiveness, simply because it is the right thing to do." Maria stepped forward. "Mr. Whitmore, you don't have to." "Yoshi," he said softly, "but I should, and it is what I should have taught my daughter to do." He turned to her fully. "I am truly sorry for what she did to you and your children. You deserved better than that." Maria's eyes filled. She held his gaze. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Slowly, remarkably, Alexandra began to listen. Not politely, not performatively, actually listen. By the time her 200 mandatory hours were complete, something unexpected happened. Alexandra walked up to the volunteer coordinator's desk and asked if she could stay on. Not because a court had ordered it, not because it would look good at a future hearing, because, she said simply, "I think I'm just starting to understand what's happening here." She wrote letters to Emma and Michael. Real letters, not typed, not dictated, not drafted by a publicist. Handwritten, in her own words, with no excuses and no justifications. Just accountability, just apology, just the truth of what she had done, and the genuine wish that they would one day feel safe again. Maria read both letters carefully before giving them to her children. She waited until she believed they were ready. Richard Whitmore established the fund as promised. Emma and Michael's education was fully secured. Their therapy continued week by week, helping 2 young children reclaim the sense of safety that a single morning had taken from them. 6 months after sentencing, Alexandra returned to my courtroom voluntarily. She stood in the same spot where she had once stood, with contempt in her eyes and designer sunglasses in her hand. "Your Honor," she said, "I hated you that day. I thought you were cruel. I thought you were unfair." She paused. "But you saved my life. I was becoming someone hollow. I had stopped seeing people. I only saw inconveniences. You interrupted that." I looked at the young woman in front of me. She was not the same person who had walked in late and shrugged at a judge. "I didn't save you, Alexandra," I said. "You saved yourself. The moment you chose to accept responsibility. That is all this court ever wanted from you." She nodded. "I'm enrolling in nursing school," she said. "I want to actually help people, not write a check at a gala so I feel important, really help them." That is what justice is supposed to look like. Not revenge, not destruction, not spectacle, transformation. Maria Chen got her car replaced. Her children began to heal. Alexandra discovered that purpose is worth more than privilege, that showing up for people who need you, without a camera crew and without a press release, is the only kind of meaning that actually holds weight. And a little girl named Emma learned that the world can still be fair, that people do face consequences, that justice, when applied with equal force, protects everyone who walks through its doors. I think about this case often, not because it was the most dramatic I have ever presided over. It was not. I have handled cases with higher stakes, larger headlines, and more powerful defendants. But this one stays with me because of what happened after the gavel came down, because of what it proved about the nature of real accountability. People sometimes ask me whether I believe people can genuinely change. It is a fair question. In this work, you see a great deal of evidence that they cannot, that patterns repeat, that people return to the same behaviors, that remorse is frequently just another performance. I have sentenced people who cried in my courtroom and laughed about it in the parking lot. I have watched defendants promise transformation and return to my bench within 18 months, having learned nothing at all. But I have also watched something else. I have watched people who were broken by accountability and rebuilt themselves from the pieces. I have watched someone discover late and painfully that the way they were living was not actually a life. It was just a very expensive performance of one. Alexandra Whitmore entered my courtroom believing she was the main character in every story. She walked out of it having learned for the first time that other people have stories too, real ones, ones that matter just as much as hers. That is why I sit on this bench, not because I enjoy punishment, not because I take satisfaction in watching people suffer, but because accountability teaches what comfort never will. Because sometimes the hardest thing that has ever happened to a person is the exact thing that finally saves them. Alexandra had every advantage in this world: wealth, education, connections, a safety net most people will never know. And none of it had made her into someone she could be proud of. 60 days in county jail and 200 hours standing beside Maria Chen in a hospital corridor did more for her character than 24 years of protected privilege ever had. She walked into my courtroom believing money could buy her way out of anything. She walked out understanding that character cannot be purchased. It has to be built through choices, through effort, through the willingness to stay in the room when you have caused harm instead of driving around it and going through a red light. And Maria Chen's children, they learned something that will carry them far beyond that morning at the intersection. They learned that justice does not belong to the wealthy. It does not belong to the well-connected, the well-dressed, or the well-represented. It belongs to everyone. To a hospice nurse in scrubs who sat in the third row and waited for the truth to be spoken out loud. And to her 2 children who deserve to know that the world could still be fair. I believe it still can be. I show up every morning to make sure of it. And if you believe that too, subscribe, because that is exactly what this channel stands for. And there are many more stories like this one still to be told.